Thank you, Phil. Appreciate you inviting me. It's an honor and a privilege to always share in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was especially an honor to realize that you were asking me to speak on the anniversary of my 40th birthday. As Barbara says, they call it in California. I want Barbara to smile. So I am an alcoholic. My name is Stephen Todd. It's good to be here and be sober. It's good to be anywhere sober. Nothing bad going on in my life that a drink won't make worse. Conversely, nothing good going on that a drink won't totally destroy. Wow. I look through the panes of these squares tonight, and I see people from my hometown. I see men from Buffalo, men from Jim's Auburn, Alabama, or Georgia meeting that I've gotten to know. And I see men from Mid Overtime down in Boca Raton, guys I have become extremely close with since the pandemic. I've only met a couple of them, and but I feel like I know each and every one of you all from being actively involved in this Zoom and other Zooms. I feel extremely blessed. When the pandemic started, fellow I knew in Raleigh invited me to a noontime Zoom meeting in Raleigh. I knew we weren't going to have live AA for a long time. I went to that Zoom meeting and I felt uncomfortable as hell. Uncomfortable. Didn't like it. Something told me, God told me, Stephen, this is the new AA. You better get used to it because this is what we're going to have. And I plunged myself into accepting this virtual platform that we have and finding some good meetings and establishing some good relationships in this platform. And it's been a blessing. It's been an absolute blessing. My sobriety date, you all know, is today, December 31, 1982, 40 years of continuous sobriety. I can't get my head around that. I have not had a drink of alcohol since the day I walked in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was whipped before I got here. I did all my relapsing before I got here. And my relapsing consists of I'd wake up in the morning and say, I'm not going to drink today. And by 4 or 5 o'clock, I'd be drinking. And that's about what my story of a relapse is. You and I are all so blessed to be here and be sober tonight, because chances are that were it not for that Bill Wilson being in the lobby of the Mayflower Hotel, hearing the tinkling of ice in a glass across the bar, deciding whether he was going to go in and have a drink, and he saw a telephone booth, and he thought, maybe if I could get a hold of another alcoholic, I won't go into that bar and I won't drink. So he made the decision to go to the phone booth, and we all know the rest of the story. He called and called around, and the way I've heard the story is that he was down to his last nickel or whatever it was to put in there, had struck out on everybody else, and he called and got a hold of Henrietta Cyberman, and she put him in touch with Dr. Bob. And because of Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, I am alive, clean and sober today. And I have a great bunch of friends who trudge this road of happy destiny with me. And it's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. The joys that I have received as a result of sobriety, being able to endure the pains of life, the hardships of everyday life that we all encounter without the need to take a drink, to use any dope, to enjoy the jubilations of life without having to amplify them. Because I was the type of person, I drank to suppress the negative feelings and I drank to amplify the positive feelings. I drank if the sun came up, if it didn't come up. I drank if the dog was nice to me, not nice to me. I drank if I got some, I drank if I didn't get some. I just drank it no matter what was going on in my life. Uh, from the forward to the 12 and 12, there's a paragraph in there that I think just encapsulates this program, which is there's just so much in this one paragraph. AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. Now, wow. I mean, what more could any of us want than to be happily and usefully whole? Um, you know, our book tells us that the lack of power is our dilemma. We we suffer from this spiritual, physical, and mental malady, and it says in boldface type. They're not boldface, but it says right in black and white there. The purpose of this book is to find a power greater than ourselves. It never occurred to me before I walked in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that having a relationship with a higher power was going to be my solution, not drinking alcohol. And not only have I discovered it's my solution to not drinking alcohol, it's my solution to living life on life terms. And it's freed me from the bondage of self. So I wrote a little prayer not too long ago that I should read every day. I should read it multiple times a day, really. But let me read it to you. I think it's pretty good. HP, I come before you a flawed human being, replete with character defects and shortcomings. I have come to realize and understand that my ego abounds and I am judgmental. I am selfish and self-centered. I lack humility. I beseech thee to grant me knowledge and insight so that I might discern the light from the dark. Grant me the strength to persevere in the tasks that face me each day. Help me to be more loving and caring for all whom I come into contact with today. Help me to remember that they are your children too. May I make an effort to smile and be polite to all and to offer a helping hand whenever and wherever I see the need. Help me to pause when troubled or agitated so that I might be still, clear my mind, and feel your presence. Make me a beacon of your never-ending love that I may cast your light upon the lost who are struggling with the multitude of issues and challenges of life that we all are confronted with on a daily basis. And most of all, help me to remember that I am not you. I'm a native Kingsportonian, third generation attorney. I grew up a life of privilege. My parents drank alcohol. There was a liquor cabinet. I never saw any of the evils associated with alcohol. I saw alcohol as something that adults did when they were having fun. Never saw anybody get drunk, throw up, no fights, any of that stuff. And I wanted to be an adult. I realized what being an adult was. First time I ever got drunk, I was 14 years old, and I basically overdosed on moonshine. I won't get into an awful lot of that because sometimes I feel like I spend too much time talking about what I would like. But I got sick as a dog, threw up, passed out on a cold hardwood floor of a farmhouse, came to the next morning buck naked, wrapped up in a throw rug on, and found my white t-shirt, white jeans, white socks, and white tennis shoes on the stoop out front covered with blood and puke. It was in the early spring. The house was winterized, so I had to walk down through knee-high wet grass as the sun was coming up with a box of soap suds to try to wash out my clothes to get rid of that smell. Went back to the house and found my friend sleeping in bedrooms upstairs. And the first thing I was told is, you got to go clean out the Volkswagen Bug. You got sick in it. And I said, we didn't. They didn't get sick. And they said, yep, we left here about 8:30 and we rode around several towns. You were the life of the party and you got sick about 1:30 coming down the driveway. Neither one of them had been sick, and I found Volkswagen Bug full of puke. And I had to clean it up, and that was pretty good evidence that I was in that car that night. Don't remember. I thought that was something that just happened to anybody that drank heavily. Wanted to drink like a man. A man should be able to hold his liquor. So, and I figured it was what that vodka stuff, because we bought it at a bootlegger, and I've been in a few liquor stores since then. I hope you believe me on that. And you don't find a lot of glue on seals on bottles you buy in a liquor store. But I swore off vodka because I thought vodka was what caused my problem. And I set out to learn how to drink like a man. I wish I would have known what I know today, that Bill Wilson was a gin head. So I sentenced myself to doom to be an alcoholic because gin became my drink of choice. But I was sophisticated. Gin in the summer, scotch in the winter, and beer and wine all year long. Uh, you know, so I got to where I could drink like a man and drink most people on the table. And I can summarize what it was like real quickly. Most of y'all have heard me read this before, and I'll read it. Whiskey bottles and brand new cars. Oak tree, you're in my way. There's too much coke and too much smoke. Look what's going on inside you. Angel of darkness is upon you, stuck a needle in your arm. So take another toke, have a blow for your nose. One more drink, fool will drown you. Now they call you Prince Charming, can't speak a word when you're full of lewds. So you'll be all right come tomorrow, but tomorrow might not be here for you. Oh, that smell, can't you smell that smell? Oh, that smell, the smell of death surrounds you. And I used to be totally wasted, blasting that song as I was cruising the interstates in my Datsun 240, just feeling prime. Um, you know, so we ended up going to law school. Made dean's list my first quarter in law school, and I realized I don't have to work real hard in law school. I had a job with my father when I got out, and I had the best time in my life I ever had in law school. I didn't have any of the pressure or the cares. And during my time in law school is when my tolerance for alcohol started to go away. I couldn't understand it. Friends were commenting on it. You used to be able to drink all night long, Stephen. What's wrong with you? And I didn't know. I didn't know. Uh, my town, Kingsport, was dry at the time. Johnson City, 20 miles away, was a university town, East Tennessee State University. They had beer and liquor over there. And I would go to nightclubs over there, honky tonks, and looking for women, looking for female companionship, and always drinking. And I struck out a hell of a lot more than I scored. And I knew when I got out of law school and came back to practice, I did not want the reputation of attorneys who hung out in those honky tonks. So I decided I need to be married. So I married a gal I had met in law school, and in hindsight, looking back, I realized that was an attempt to control my drinking. And in reality, that escalated my drinking and drugging because I had been raised to be perfect, to never make a mistake. If you did, never let anyone know. And I knew before I got off the cruise on the honeymoon, I'd made a mistake. I didn't want to be married to her. But if I got a divorce, everyone would know I was not perfect. And I couldn't stand that. So I figured if I hung in it long enough, she'd change. And damned if she didn't. She became a judge. So I was in contempt of court all the time. And that didn't sit real well with me. She had me convinced that we'd go to marriage counseling. And when we got to the marriage counselor, all he wanted to talk about was my drinking. And I knew she'd been seeing that counselor for months before we got there. And so my assignment was to keep a list of how much I drank every day. And I made a list, and I fudged big time. I mean, I fudged big time. And I'd get caught, and she'd add drinks to it. And I'd have bottles in various places in the house. So when I never let my glass get completely empty. So I went by where a stash was, I'd fill it back up. And so I was playing that game with that. And, it kept, I kept going down with it and not understanding what was going on. I was involved in an organization, Ducks Unlimited. Some of y'all may know what that is, but that's where they have these fundraising. You raise monies to improve the breeding grounds up in Canada, so there are more little duckies and little geese to fly south. It shows you can shoot them to. So I was on a committee, and we were doing that. We always had planning meetings for our annual banquet, and we always drank during these meetings. And there was one fellow named Jerry who didn't drink. And I started talking to him about why he didn't drink, and he said he was an alcoholic and he went to AA. And so he'd gone to the University of the South, down in Monteagle, Tennessee, Swanee University, and he talked a little bit about his drinking, and I kind of let that register. And the night of our banquet, a month or so later, I was pretty blitzed, and I said, Jerry, you think I got a drinking problem? And he says, I don't know. If you ever decide you do, please give me a call. So he moved away a few months after that to Nashville. And he gave me his unlisted phone number before we left. So that was in the fall of '81. One of my best friends got a DUI. He was a probation officer in Scott County, Virginia. His name was Kevin. His mother was in AA, and he started going to AA in January of 1982. He'll have 41 years of sobriety tomorrow. And he tried to get me to go to AA, and he said I would recoil like a moth from a flame. It was almost like I would have to sign my name in blood to be able to go in the room. I knew going to Alcoholics Anonymous meant I had to stop drinking, and I couldn't imagine life without alcohol. So that summer, I drank what should have been a lethal overdose of alcohol, but because of the amount of cocaine I was doing, I didn't pass out, and my judgy wife took me to the emergency room, and I consumed a few liters of glucose pretty quickly. I was hospitalized for a few days, and before I had left the hospital, friends were bringing me that magic white powder to keep me going. And I got out of the hospital and sat in the backyard while my wife went off to do her judging, and had a 6-pack of Bush beer and several twisted joints, and sit there in the sun and the grass, smoking and drinking. Marlon, how wonderful life was. And I had almost died. I had no clue what was going on. I was miserable. I wanted to be happy, but I couldn't be happy. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. It seemed like everything I touched was turning to crap. So on up into the fall, about November, right before Thanksgiving, is when I started to crash and burn 40 years ago. And Christmas Eve, I had wanted to go to bed with my wife, and she knew what I wanted to do, and she didn't want anything to do with me from that standpoint. So she went to bed, and I proceeded to drink, and I proceeded to go through all the magic white powder that I had, and I ran out, and I needed to keep going, and went up in the countryside trying to find my dealer, who was also a good friend, and I couldn't find him. And I came home at daylight on Christmas morning, and she was sitting on the front concrete steps and crying. And I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "I want a separation." And I'm a divorce lawyer. I know what a separation is. And I knew that the jig was up. Everybody was going to know I was a failure. And I couldn't take that. I was going to be so embarrassed. The ultimate embarrassment. I was a failure. I had made a mistake. Todd's did not make mistakes. So I was going to go goose hunting the next day up in Delaware with my father-in-law and brother-in-law. And my family came over, my 2 younger brothers, her mom and dad and brother come up, and we're eating Christmas dinner at my house. And everybody leaves except I'm in the house with my wife, me, and father-in-law, mother-in-law, and brother-in-law. And the next thing I know, I'm being awakened in the morning on December the 26th, 1982. My wife madder than she's ever been. It's time to get up. They're ready to go to Delaware goose hunting. And I said, "Why are you so mad?" She said, "I've never been so embarrassed my entire life. You passed out on the couch. My brother and I drug you back to the bedroom. We tried to take your clothes off, and you said, Don't mess with me. I'll throw up on you. And then you lay back there for 15, 20 minutes until you passed out, holler for somebody to bring a gun back there and kill you. No recollection of that. So I went to Delaware goose hunting, and I got left with some my in-laws, nephews and nieces who were 8 to 10 years old, a bunch of them, while the adults went off to a party, and I stayed there at the farmhouse. And I wanted to get drunk more than I ever wanted to get drunk in my life. And I was drinking Budweiser beer, which I really despised. And I'd drink one and hide it here, and I'd drink one and hide it there. I was hiding it all over the house and all over the farm and in the barns, and I couldn't get a buzz. First time in my life, I could never get a buzz. The next night, we were at a bar having dinner, and I wanted to have just a couple of drinks to get a mild buzz because I was going goose hunting the next morning. I blacked out. Woke up in the morning, was taken to a goose pit, which is a wooden box sunk in the ground to hunt geese with. And my nerves were so shot, I was shaking that box in the ground. Geese are pretty big creatures, and when they come in on you, just get pretty excited anyway. But this was beyond exciting. My nerves were gone. And we drove home the next morning, or maybe it was that same day. I was driving, and my father and brother-in-law in the car, and they were napping, and I was the driver. And long drive down Interstate 81 all the way through Virginia. And I was wanting a drink more than I'd ever wanted to drink my entire life. And I wanted to pull off at every exit to get a beer. And I knew I couldn't do that because of my father-in-law. So I get back home and walk in the house and pour an iced tea sized glass of scotch. Take a big sip out of it. My wife walks in. I say, "What did you decide?" She said, "I want a separation." And I said, "It's because of this," and showed her that glass of scotch. She said, "I don't care, I want a separation." I poured that out. That was December 29th, 1982. That's the last drink of alcohol I had. That night I went to bed shaking in tears. I knew everybody was going to know I was a complete failure. And I said, "God help me." All I said. Woke up the next morning, go to work, and by God, I'm going to beat her to the courthouse. I dictate and file my own divorce complaint. Go back to my office. My friend Jerry, who had moved to Nashville, Tennessee, I had been representing his son on DUI, and his daughter, Joni, happened to be in town, and she called to check on her brother's case. And I said, "Joni, do you have your dad's phone number?" And she gave me his unlisted number. 11 o'clock in the morning, I called it. He answered on the first ring. He said, "What's going on?" I said, "Jerry, I got a problem." He said, "What's the problem?" I said, "Alcohol drugs, I can't stop." He was in the early stages of MS. He said, "I drive up there, but I can't drive. Will you come to Nashville for New Year's weekend?" And I said, "Yes." He later told me he was never in his office past 7:15, 7:30 in the morning. 11 o'clock in the morning, he answered the phone on the first ring. So I told my parents what I was going to do, move back home with them. They had my brother call me from Pittsburgh and say, my brother Arthur said, "Mom and Dad going to buy your airline ticket, come up here. I got a pound of pot and an ounce of Coke." And I told him no. And my father said, "Well, you can go to Nashville tomorrow if that's what you want to do. I'll see you just have a couple of drinks and we'll watch football tonight." And I knew I could not have just a couple of drinks. I knew at that time of the year that the tires on my car are what we call Baldy Maypops. The thread was showing, and I needed to have good tires to go over the Cumberland Plateau. So I called my friend who was my dealer, and he met me at the tire store and left my car there to get tires. We went back to his place, and I smoked some and snorted some, and I knew, boom, just like that. Very same thing as alcohol. Very same thing. Those are the last mood-altering substances I put in my body, and that was December 30, 1982. And I didn't know how I was going to make it through that night. And as I'm driving back after getting in my car to my parents' house, I see a car pass me, and I look over, it's going by, and there's my friend Kevin, who beat me into AA by a year, and he had a brand new car that I'd never seen before. I get to my office and say, "I wonder if Kevin's going to his parents' house." He lived in Scott County, Virginia. And I called his mom's house, and Kevin answered on the very first ring. And I told him what was going on. And he said, I'll come over and we'll watch football. He came over, we drank coffee, and we didn't watch football. We talked about alcoholism and AA. And I go to Nashville the next day. So I call December 31st, my first day without alcohol or drugs. And I call that my sobriety date. And I tell people, it doesn't make any difference if you call your sobriety date the last day you drink and use. Just establish a date and keep it. That's what's important. And don't ever forget that date. The most important date in my life is my sobriety date. So I ended up going to Nashville and get down there, and Jerry took me to an AA party New Year's Eve, and I felt like a stick in a horrible mud bath. I felt so out of place. There were these people I didn't know, and they were talking. It wasn't an AA meeting. They were just having, socializing. I'm a horrible chit chatter. But we go to the 202 Club, the Friendship Club in Nashville, Tennessee, at 10 o'clock in the morning on January the 1st, my very first AA meeting. And Jerry said, we go to meetings early. And so we got there early, and there were people from every walk of life in there. You could tell by their dress. Nobody's eyes were glassy. Nobody's speech was slurred. Nobody had alcohol on their breath. And they were smiling and appeared to be having a good time. And I couldn't comprehend that, because at 10 o'clock in the morning on January 1st, you were either still partying from the night before, you had just gotten up, or trying to slam a few back to where you can get reasonably functional to do some serious drinking or watch some football on New Year's Day. And so people there shared with me, and I shared with them. And for the first time in my life, I was with people that said, we understand. And I knew those people did understand. I don't know how to describe it. Most of you all may know what I'm getting ready to say, but I felt at home. I felt where I belonged. My problem had always been, if you only understood me, why can't you understand me? I had that terminal uniqueness. So we go back to Jerry's, and he'd maneuvered to talk to my father, and he'd gotten me in the Cumberland Heights Treatment Center right outside of Nashville. I wouldn't have had a job if I hadn't been working for my father. And so we go to an AA meeting that night in Franklin, Tennessee, being chaired by a lady, and there were maybe 50 people in the room. And the meeting went on, and I enjoyed what I was hearing. At the end, she said, anybody have any questions? And I said, yes, ma'am. I said, how do I sleep? I said, I haven't had a drink in a few days, and I hear voices in my head. The tapes are playing. How do I stop those voices? How to stop those tapes? And she looked at me and said, do you believe in God? And I don't know if anybody asked me that question in years. And I kind of, with reservation, said yes. Then she asked me an even crazier question. Does the God you believe in sleep at night? And I kind of chuckled, and I said, no, God doesn't sleep at night. And then she asked the killer, she said, I want you to make me a promise. And I'm looking at her, and 50 people are looking at me. And I said, okay. She said, I want you to promise that when you get back to where you're staying, that you'll get on your knees and ask this God who doesn't sleep to stop the voices, to shut down the tapes, take your problems away so you can get a good night's sleep and be rested when you go into rehab in the morning and learn about alcoholism and Alcoholics Anonymous. Will you promise me that? And there are 50 people in that room staring at me. That means there's 100 eyeballs going, and I was on the spot. I mean, I was on the hot seat. I said yes. Did I mean it at the time? I don't know, but it stopped everybody from staring at me. So we go back to Jerry's and we watch a little football, and then I go in his guest bedroom and I turn off the lights and get in the bed, and something says, Stephen, you promised that lady. So I got out of bed and got on my knees in a dark room. I felt like a fool. I hadn't been on my knees since I was a child, and said, now lay me down to sleep. I got on my knees and said, hey, God, I know you don't sleep at night. Stephen, I got an alcohol and drug problem. I'm going to rehab tomorrow. I'd like to get a good night's rest. Will you please stop the voices, shut the tapes down, and I'll take my life back and deal with it in the morning. And then I got into bed. The next thing I knew, it was day, and the sheets were smooth as silk. And I'm sure everybody on here knows what sleepless nights are like, because when you wake up in the morning, your bed looks like a crumpled up quilt. And I was blown away by that. And so I go into Cumberland Heights, and they keep me just overnight because I basically detox myself. And the next day, they send me down to a cabin. They say the men in your cabin are already in session. You go down there. So I go into the cabin, open the door, and I see a group of men and a counselor. He turns around and says, "Oh, you're the lawyer. You can always tell a lawyer, but you can't tell him anything." And I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, I'll show him. So I listened. And the next day, there was a lecture on spirituality. The director of the program, and we were in the chapel, which was the auditorium. And he had a big easy chair up there, and he pulled a poster out, board out, put it in there, said, "This seat's reserved from God." And he dimmed the lights and played 3 songs. Precious Memories, Why Me, Lord, and the Lord's Prayer by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And during those 3 songs, I cried warm tears, had warm goosebumps all over my body, and I felt a load lifted off my shoulders. More at peace than I've ever been in my entire life. From that point to today, I have never had a desire and craving for alcohol and drugs. The last day I was in rehab, that same lecture series rolled around. I went to it because I wanted that feeling again. I wanted that feeling. And I went to it and I didn't get it. The last night I was in rehab, it was a Sunday night, that the person getting out the soonest after that was the one chairing the AA meeting for the inmates. And it was Super Bowl Sunday. And we thought we were in a democracy. And we tried to lobby to change the time of the AA meeting so we could watch the Super Bowl. And needless to say, we didn't have any voting rights. And so the ball game's going on, and it's a good ball game, and the alarm goes off to go to the meeting, and every man in my cabin walked out that cabin and slammed the screen door shut, walking up the hill to where the meeting was. And I think I was the last person out of the cabin, and I did the same damn thing. Disgusted. Couldn't finish watching the Super Bowl. Now, about halfway up that hill, it dawned on me, did watching a Super Bowl ever help you not drink? You're here because you have a drinking problem. So I chaired the meeting on that night, and that metamorphosis that I had from walking from the cabin, slamming a door in pure disgust, the transition, walking up that hill to walk in, the gratitude I have that I'm here where I need to be. I'm an alcoholic and addict. Certain things in my life are dependent upon my staying sober. And so we did that. And I got out, and my friend Jerry had recommended I get his sponsor from up here in Kingsport to be my sponsor, a gentleman by the name of Ray Duncan. He had 25 years of sobriety. He was an area delegate from the state of Tennessee, Tennessee's Area 64. And so I come up to Kingsport, and I meet Ray at a meeting the first night that I'm home. And I felt so out of place walking into that meeting. I looked around in the parking lot. I didn't want anybody to see me, Stephen Todd, going into an AA meeting in my hometown, because I just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right. And I go in that meeting, and I'm nervous sitting there, and I see some people I know in there, nobody very well, but I recognize people. And it came around to share. As soon as I started sharing, I felt at home. I had been to meetings outside of rehab for a couple of days in Nashville, going with my friend Jerry once I'd gotten out of rehab. So I get with Ray and go to his house, and we started talking about working the steps. And he was bald-headed. He had a high school education. He worked at Eastman Kodak here in town, the plant. And wore wire rim glasses. He said, "Stephen, what step you on?" I said, "Well, Ray, we had to do 5 I went ahead and did 6 and 7. I'm ready for 8. And he looks over his wire rim glasses at me and says, "The hell you are. You're still wet behind the damn ears." And that pissed me off. It pissed me off. So I fumed about that for a while until I realized that I needed to get on with doing this. And so we, when we got back together, he, my first assignment was to read the doctor's opinion and to understand the nature of my malady, to understand alcoholism. And then when I thought I knew that, and we had discussed that, then the next assignment was to read chapter 3, more about alcoholism. And from there, I had to realize that chapter 3 was the story of Stephen Todd. That was my life story, chapter 3. And when I did that, he felt I sufficiently understood that. We started working through the steps, and we worked through the steps. And I would sit and hold his book, and we'd read it, talk together, you know, and all that. And I was eager for this program. I wasn't scared of any of the steps. I knew that this was going to free me from the bondage of self. It was to give me the relief that I wanted, so I could not be at loggerheads with the world. I didn't fully understand what it meant to walk in the sunlight of the Spirit at that time. I didn't understand the vision for you, which Jack's going to read later on. I didn't understand the full significance of all of that, but I knew that something great awaited me because of the people I was meeting and what I heard them talk about. And I felt it then, and I feel it today even more so. The big book that was raised that I worked the 12 steps out of, on the inside of the front cover, it was written to my good friend Ray Duncan, love Bill Wilson. So I held and worked the steps out of a book that Bill Wilson had held and signed when Ray was at the World Service Conference in New York as a delegate from the state of Tennessee. And I get chill bumps right now thinking about that. And so Ray wanted me to be involved in service work and explained to me what service work was. And I could look around in East Tennessee at the meetings I was going to, and the men and women who had what I wanted, the quality of sobriety I wanted, were all involved in service work. And I said, there's something to this about getting involved. And I was told you always say yes to anything that happens, you're asked to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I can remember, guys, just like it was yesterday, and I talk about this frequently, somewhere, 9 to 10, 12 months of sobriety, I was asked to go speak in Greenville, Tennessee, about 45 miles away at a regular meeting. And I had family obligations then that we were doing. And I called Ray up and I told him what it is. I was conflicted. And he said, "Stephen, tell me what your family's doing." And I told him. And he said, "Are you going to drink if you don't go down there and speak?" And I said, "No." So, well, we get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous to have a life outside the realms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Your obligations now as a sober man are to your family, but you must remain rooted in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I still remember that. I feel guilty about that. And let me bring this to present day. I was asked a couple of months ago by a fellow down in Jasper, Tennessee, if I would come down next fall and be the speaker at their picnic. And some of you all might know I'm a big Tennessee football fan. And I said, "Well, Clardy, if you can set it on a weekend that Tennessee doesn't have a home game, conditions on it." And he called me back and said, "We said it, Tennessee does not have a home game." And about 2 weeks ago, I get an email. A conflict has arisen. The meeting is now going to be when South Carolina comes to Tennessee and plays in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'm thinking, oh, South Carolina destroyed Tennessee a few weeks ago, knocked them out of the playoff picture, and they're going to be playing in Knoxville that day. And I think about it, and I send him an email. "Clardy, I'd be happy to be there." And he says, "You're a good AAer." And I needed to do that. I don't need to go and watch a football game. So I'm going to go do that while South Carolina and Tennessee are playing in Knoxville, because I consider myself a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing. I have learned how important it is to be in the middle of the boat. We talk a lot here in Kingsport about the boat and being in the middle of the boat. Clancy has a good tape that's out there, or CD now. If you can Google it and find it, it's called The Invisible Boat. I'll give you a little brief overview of what it is. It talks about SS Catalina, or this treatment center is a cruise ship, and it's off Catalina Island is off the coast, and Catalina is sobriety, and it's just this cruise ship will get you sober, and they'll take you out there, not take you all the way to Catalina, and they'll put you out in the water, and you say you just start swimming, and there'll be a couple of guys come by in a rowboat, you get in with them, and they'll take you on to the island. And this fella's in there drowning, and he sees these two old codgers coming, and they're doing like this. He doesn't see a boat. He doesn't see any oars. They come by and say, "Get in." He said, "You crazy bastards." And they go on and back in rehab again, and they tell him, "Don't take you back out there. Get in the water. Look for these men in the boat." And he says, "Here they come. No boat, no oars." They come by and say, "Come on, get in." He goes, "Oh, shit." But he climbs in the boat, and they say, "Pick up an oar." He picks up an oar, and he starts rowing. And as he's rowing, the boat begins to materialize. The more he rows, it's there. And that's what I had to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to get involved. The analogy of a boat is so good. If life has a lot of storms, and the storms of life can get a boat rocking and rolling. If you're sitting up on the sides, if you're sitting up on the gunnels in rough weather, it's pretty easy to fall off. But if you're in the middle of the boat with a boatload of people, you're there and you're protected, and everybody's holding on to each other, trying to stay safe. And so that's what that is, and it's, Ray was pushing me towards this service work, and we go to assemblies, and God, I hated assemblies. Never heard so much dang argument in my entire life. Argue over the price of a gallon of coffee, and things like that. It didn't make any damn sense to me to have to do anything with carrying a message of AA. And I was getting on state standing committees and meeting people and moving up the hierarchy about the time my wife and I decided we want to start a family. And I knew that if I got a state commitment like that, I wouldn't be home very much at all, especially if I got moved on up and became delegate or area delegate. You're back gone every weekend. And I couldn't do that to my wife. And it was about that time that the lawyer assistance program movement started taking off in the United States. And that's an EAP for the legal profession. Tennessee did not have a lawyer assistance program. And I was asked by a couple of recovering attorneys, and we got involved, and we created kind of a ragtag organization. It was just a volunteer organization. And we worked with a committee, the Tennessee Bar Association, and we get a little bit of money. And we went to some American Bar Association conferences on lawyer assistance programs, and we were learning what states who had programs were doing, and and come back and try to do that, but we couldn't get money to do it, and so after a while, we got a friend of the alcoholics, a friend of lawyer assistance program, a judge on the Tennessee Supreme Court who doesn't have our problem, and she convinced the court to create a lawyer assistance program, and she called me and asked if I would chair the task force to create the Tennessee Lawyers Assistance Program, and we did, and it got approved by the court. And she called me and said, "The court's just designated you the first chair of the Tennessee Lawyers Assistance Program." So I chair the TLAP for the first 6 years of its existence. I was also one of 10 members of the ABA Commission on Lawyer Assistance Program, 7 members from the U.S. and 3 from Canada, and I served 3 one-year terms on the ABA COLAP Commission. And I saw this as another way to help alcoholics, because one of the biggest aspects of what you do in a lawyer assistance program is education. You're educating the bench and the bar, and by the bench I mean the judges, and the bar are the lawyers. how to spot alcoholism and drug addiction in their clients or in their colleagues. And if you can learn to do that in your clients and colleagues, then you can also spot it in your clients. So it was kind of like a Republican trickle down sobriety, like trickle down economics. And, so I felt I was helping society as a whole by doing these things. And, 2001, I started an email with friends that I named the Daily Ponderables, and they started circulating amongst lawyers' assistance programs throughout the country. And some programs, when they would get people under contract, would say, you need to subscribe to this newsletter and you need to read it. And so I started doing that. And damn, if right now there's 34,400 people about all over the world that get that thing every day. And I can see the statistics, and 48 to 50% open the Daily Ponderables every day. That's mind-boggling. There have been times when I've been so frustrated. Is anybody reading this thing? Anybody reading this? And then I'll get a letter. I say, thank you so much for the Daily Ponderables. I was so close to drinking or so close to killing myself. But the one that came yesterday turned the light on and I didn't drink. I didn't harm myself. And I just look up and say, God, thank you. Thank you for giving me the fortitude to continue to do this. I'm trying to pay attention to time and feel. So this, Stephen was a real bad alcoholic, and like Peter, they didn't think he was ever going to get sober. And, he finally got sober and started doing some things in his community, helping other people. And when he passes away, he's at the pearly gates in St. Peter. So we didn't think you were going to make it, Stephen. We had a place reserved for you at the other place. And Stephen says, what's that other place like? I said, I'd like to know. St. Peter said, well, we don't normally do this. And St. Peter waves his hand. And St. Peter and Stephen are transported to the place. And it's a misty filled room. And as the smoke and the mist starts to clear, Stephen looks out in the room and sees a banquet table with the most luxurious spread on it, and crystals and all that stuff, and elegantly dressed men and women sitting around that table. All these fine foods and everything, and the place is deadly silent. And Stephen says, what's wrong with these people? Nobody's talking, nobody's laughing, nobody's doing anything. And St. Peter says, look again. And Stephen looks, and the men and women, their arms are 6-foot forks and 6-foot spoons, and they're just miserable. And Stephen says, I'm glad I didn't get here. And St. Peter says, okay, let's go. And waves his hand. And in another misty filled room, and as it starts to clear, he hears laughter and gaiety. And he looks out and sees that same banquet table with the foods on it and crystal and all that. Sees men and women smiling, happy, and having a good time. And St. Peter says, look a little closer. And he notices that those men and women sitting around that table have their arms are 6-foot forks and 6-foot spoons, but they're feeding each other. That's what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. We feed each other. The bondage of self has been relieved. I know that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my problems. And I need to work on that on a daily basis, multiple times a day. My wife, who is sitting here listening, knows that I have a hell of a damn ego. I mentioned that in that little prayer that I wrote, and she has dubbed my ego the Stephen Todd Railroad. And she'll tell me, Stephen, you're on that train again. You're running the train again. And my ego is like a locomotive. And, a locomotive, when it leaves the station, starts out slow until it builds up some steam. And once it builds up some steam, it gets to rolling down the damn tracks pretty damn fast. And I am the owner, operator, conductor, chief ticket taker, and everything on the Stephen Todd Railroad. And when I get to rolling, I'll run you over. And lots of times today, I realize I'm on that train and it's getting going pretty fast, and I can stop myself. And sometimes I wait till I get in the line, I hit my head on that wall, but it don't hit my head like I used to before I had a program. And I'm able to look back and laugh and say, God, I've let my damn ego get in the way. And EGO, edging God out. I have something else in my life more important than my relationship with God at that time. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Share tonight. I don't know if I have helped any of you all or not, but it has helped me to relive uh, where I've been the last 40 years and where I want to continue to go today. So let me close with a little poem that I always close with. It's entitled, Here's the Love. There's the wonderful love of a beautiful maid, the love of a stauncher man. There's the love of a baby unafraid. These have existed since time began. But the most wonderful love and the love of all love, the love that outshines every other, is that infinite, tender, compassionate love of one alcoholic for another. Thank you.